And we are live with none other than Sean Sheppard. He's managing partner at U.Plus, lives a great life. He's on his ranch right now. Hugely talented and experienced serial entrepreneur, founded a bunch of companies, which we're going to discuss today. Sean, welcome to the pod. I'm really glad to have you on. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about U.Plus?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Pleasure to be here. Sean Sheppard, 30 years as a serial tech entrepreneur from the Valley. I've had 3 exits. I did 3 venture funds. I did the world's first product market fit accelerator called GrowthX. I even did the first, one of the first schools to train people to work in tech roles in Silicon Valley called GrowthX Academy. And about 3 years ago, I acquired half of a corporate venture builder called U.Plus, where now we focus on building startups for large companies around the world.
How did it feel once you made it, and what was that day or that feeling or that input that made you think, okay, now I've made it, I've accomplished most of what I intended to accomplish?
I'll let you know.
Not yet.
I've never felt like I've made it, and I've never felt like I've accomplished what I want to accomplish. Maybe that's what drives me, just the fear of not doing what I know I could do. You know, I don't want to be on my deathbed regretting the things I didn't try. And so let's just say there's a little voice in my head every day. Am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? What should I be doing differently, both personally and professionally? It doesn't mean doesn't mean I don't enjoy the wins when they come. They're probably more relieving than they are satisfying. But it is what kind of keeps me going.
You still feel that you're growing at the same rate nowadays, or you're growing even more than you were?
I'd say the answer to that is yes and no, in different ways for different reasons. You know, I think personally, I'm growing probably more now because I think I'm much more self-aware now that I'm 50 years old, and I'm not driven by testosterone anymore necessarily. And then I think in other ways, I've let's say pruned some certain things out of my life, both personally and professionally, that I've chosen not to bother with anymore. So there's no growth opportunity there because I just don't think it's worth it. And then in other areas, I'd say I'm, probably more focused on growth in let's say specific aspects of my personal and professional life, because I've learned what I like and what I don't like. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I think the thing that I'm focused most on these days professionally is leverage, and learning how to use leverage to let's say provide value to the world, whether that leverage comes through people or technology or media or capital, but thinking about different ways of leveraging those things to make a bigger impact.
How can you accelerate that self-awareness? I've been on retreat. I interview 10 to 15 successful entrepreneurs on a daily basis to gain knowledge from them. I take notes, I journal, I even chat with Charles GPT. I created a GPT and I just chat with him to understand my own psyche. How do you accelerate self-awareness?
Well, I think number one, it's a choice that you have to make, and then you have to develop the right kinds of habits, very similar to the ones that sounds like you've developed for yourself. And then I think you just need to have the right kinds of people around you. I've always tried to seek out smarter, better, more accomplished people, and learn from them and spend time with them to elevate myself and my work. And I don't know whether it was my father, my grandfather, or anybody else when I was younger, just said, look, if you want to be the best at something, you should learn from the best and be around the best. And that's always been my strategy. Hasn't always worked, but it's always been my approach towards trying to just get better.
And I fully agree with that podcast. And I also have my mastermind. Let's see how I can make it work, improve it 1% on a daily basis. You talked about testosterone. Oddly enough, it's something I think quite a lot about nowadays as a biohacker. How do you balance out testosterone with cortisol and estrogen, that feminine energy? Because I started my Holdco's website yesterday. It's called Ecosystem. It's kind of woke as a domain name, but I feel that the feminine energy is quite important to scale, because testosterone, it burns fast, right? As males, we die younger than our wives, for example. So how do you balance out that energy?
Yeah, my dad always used to say men died earlier because they wanted to. It's a joke, of course, but no, no, it's an interesting question, and it's something you think about a lot more later in life. Look, I'm not. I'll start it with this premise, right? I'm not afraid of death. I know it's coming, and when it comes, it comes. I don't have as much of a choice or control over it as my younger egocentric self used to think. It's going to happen when it happens. Doesn't mean I'm not trying to do the things, not necessarily to extend life, but to make life right now better. Taking care of myself. I think the first and most important thing that anybody has to recognize, and it may sound cliche, but you get out of your body what you put into it. And that's not just food and drink, or physical things, but it's also the mental, emotional, and spiritual things. And I think that, in the age of social media and the internet's probably more important than anything, especially coming out of COVID. And you think about what's happened to people. I had right in the heart of COVID, I had a freshman in college and I had a junior in high school, their most formative years, and they were stuck in bedrooms for a year and a half. And what that did to them and what they had to go through with that stuff. So I'm very careful about what, like, for example, I haven't watched the news, or I don't read the news and haven't in about 5 years. Neither does my wife. We try to encourage our kids to ignore it, because most of it's toxic and poison, and in a mental way, just in the same way as putting a shit ton of fast food or drugs into your system, if not even more so. Sometimes we just don't know what the effects of those things are at the moment. So I try to, I start with that, right? I'm not afraid to die. I'm not trying to live to be 150. I'm not Robert Sinclair, although I've learned a lot from him as an example about things like MNMs and NADs. I take athletic greens every morning. I intermittent fast. I only eat between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. 90% of the time. I will cheat as much as anybody. I'm not afraid to admit that. I try to exercise every day, even just a little bit. I usually just use my own body weight, because I do have a gym here, but I don't necessarily go in there and do that. Sit-ups, push-ups, that sort of thing, just to get my body going first thing in the morning before I get in the shower, that sort of thing. Try not to touch my phone until I've gone through my routines. And then just try and live that sort of lifestyle. Look, I'm Irish. I love a cocktail as much as the next guy. I love a good cigar. But I also want to be able to enjoy my life, right? So that balance is there. With respect to, say, the feminine energy versus the masculine energy, I agree with you. I think, men don't start to tend to calm down until they hit late 30s, early 40s. Women mature much faster, not just in physical development, but in mental development as well. And I think we all know that about the frontal lobe and how it develops much faster in women than it does in men. And that's where decision making comes from. So as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate that. The feminine energy gives me more empathy. It gives me more emotional intelligence, helps me improve my listening skills. And it balances, that against the male energy, which sometimes could also be viewed as ego and spirit, right? If you're thinking about maybe a yin and a yang approach to it, or a, a Buddhist view to, to the balance of life. But trying to just defeat the ego every day is hard enough when you're a man.
How about the vision of your portfolio of companies and your holdco as more feminine, creating a community, right? And the startup themselves being more masculine? Would that be a good way to describe the equilibrium and what you're trying to building with U.Plus?
Yeah, maybe I haven't really given it much thought from that angle. GrowthX, our portfolio was 37% female founders, and they have time and time again proven to outperform the male founders.
Wow.
I think there's a few reasons for that. I think the biggest one is their focus
Chip on the shoulder.
discipline. Their focus and discipline towards the tasks at hand, their efficiency, how well organized they are, from an execution perspective. They tend to get things done faster, I think, and I think in a lot of respects tend to build better cultures.
I had more success with female employees as well, my sides. Their patience, their lack of recklessness, and so forth. So yeah, I think like estrogen
Calculated,
definitely.
yeah, I would call it calculated risk taking.
Yep.
They take risks, but they're much more calculated in the way that they do it.
Right. So U.Plus is super interesting. So stage 1, ideation phase; stage 2, validation; stage 3, market testing; 4 is tech build; and 5, I can't see it on my screen, scale, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you're trying to build there, because that's my dream right there, to have a portfolio and an ecosystem of multiple startups. It's super fun. It's super intellectually stimulating, and obviously you can win big time. You only need one unicorn to have your return. Tell us about what you're building here.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about U.Plus for me, as somebody who's always done my own startups, is when I started to look at how corporations tried to innovate, right? And they use the term innovation, and we use the term entrepreneurship or startups in our world. They have every advantage over the startup community, because they have immense amount of resources, brand equity, subject matter expertise, smart people, reach, that startups don't have, right? A startup, I've always said, is just a stranger with a strange offering going to other strangers and trying to ask them to do strange things together. They don't recognize it, but that's how they're perceived in the market, which is one of the reasons it's so challenging and why the success rates are so low and the failure rates are so high. In corporates, what I found was interesting was the failure rates of their new ventures and new endeavors are just as high as the startup community. And I was just fascinated with, why is that? It doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't be that way. They have all these advantages. And then when you dig in and you look at it, they fail for a lot of the same reasons, right? 70% of funded startups fail. Institutionally funded startups. 8 of the top 10 reasons don't have anything to do with their product or their technology. They have to do with their people and the markets, right? Is there a market need? Is there a lack of differentiation? Is the timing right? Is the team right? Are they executing well? Are they listening and learning and focused on problems and customers instead of products and technologies? So those same reasons exist with corporates as well, because I think it's just a lot of that's human behavior. But they have other challenges as well, which is, number one, there aren't any entrepreneurs in these big companies, typically. Most of the entrepreneurs that started these companies are dead or retired. So what they hire for are people that are not going to take risks, and people that are not going to screw up what's already been built, and people who are going to optimize what's already been standardized, which is great. And they need all of that, right? Fantastic operators. But what makes you great at that doesn't necessarily make you great or even experienced at the new, right? Managing the known is different than managing the new, or building the new versus the known. And so there's a mismatch of talent in these big companies. They want to do the same things that startups are doing, but they don't have the right folks. They don't have the right mindset. They don't have the right skill set. They don't have experience in doing it. And they certainly don't have a framework, as you just outlined our framework for getting from 0 to 1, right? How do you create good ideas and new opportunities for your company? How do you curate those? How do you foster them? How do you filter them? How do you select which ones you should go then validate and test in the market? How do you identify proof of market for those? What are the metrics around that? And then what do you actually build that people are going to pay for in a market that's big enough for your company to care about? And oh, by the way, how are you going to measure all that? And then who's going to do it? Because everybody in a big company already has a job. They already have metrics, and they're already incentivized and compensated based on the now, not the new. And so there's a constant friction there that is very, very difficult to overcome. And as a result, only 3% of new business models that are launched inside of a big company ever get to 50 million in ARR or above. And so my goal and U.Plus's goal is to bring the thinking, the mindset, the skill set, the frameworks, and the experience of successful startup building to big companies to help them be more competitive in that space.
Cool. And if I'm a big company, you come to me. Most big companies have their labs and their startup incubator. Like, do you work with them directly? Do you help them start their own startup incubator if they don't have one?
Yeah, we'll do both. So we'll work either on a programmatic way of helping them stand up a venture studio and staff it and run it. We'll co-innovate or co-create with existing teams. We'll come in on in-flight ventures and help drive those as well. We also have a venture investing arm where we help them set up corporate venture capital functions and make good bets and investments in the ecosystem. We have a new AI solution that we just launched in May that automates the venture discovery process of market research. What used to take our teams 3 months to come up with 3 to 5 really good business model ideas for a company, we can now do that in a day. And we can do 20 to 30 ideas per day. So that's the power, again, of AI and leverage, right? So it can compress the entire life cycle down by 3 months, leveraging what we've done professionally as an organization for 15 years. So yeah, so that's how we help.
Cool. And you charge a monthly fee. Do you also take a share of the startups that actually get started from your help?
We let the companies drive that. We give them structural options and say, look, these are the different ways this can work, and these are the models. What do you want to do? For the most part, the majority of what we do is fee for service because it's just easier for the corporation to understand that and buy that. And this is a lesson any entrepreneur out there, right? Sell your product or service to people the way they are used to buying and budgeting. Don't try and shoehorn your model, no matter how innovative and awesome and smart you think it is or that you are, into an organization that doesn't understand it. So if they don't have experience and understanding of, let's say, a venture model that brings in GPs, LPs, and launches a bunch of startups a year, or they're not interested in sharing IP or equity or ownership, that's fine. The ones that are, great, we're more than happy to participate in that way. But for the most part, most of them are just fee for service.
Right. And these big companies, they do have the budget. Did you productize to the point that you charge a flat fee for all, or it's quote per quote? And I would estimate it's around 20 to 30K a month.
It's more than that, but the first 3 stages are very standard because we control those, right? The dependency, there are no external dependencies other than partnering with the organization itself. But once you get to the build phase, it's then very specific to what the scope of the build is, right? So how big is it? What is it? Is it hardware? Is it software? Is it some combination of those 2 things? Is it developed technology, applied technology? What's the business model and the life cycle of the customers in that space? So the first 3 phases, ideation, validation, and testing, are all very standard. Validation or ideation used to take, as I said, 3 months, costs $300K, and you get 3 to 5 really good ideas out of it. and then validation and testing, which is building lightweight prototypes and testing them with users for 3 months, is $400K. The ideation process has been completely disrupted by the AI product. So now we can do, as I said, we can do 1 week sprints for 30K and come up with 20 to 30 really good ideas that need to be tested, all the way up to an enterprise-wide license where an organization might leverage it themselves for several $100,000 to $1 million plus a year, to really help hone in their strategy and directionally guide them on where they want to play in the future. And then the build and scale stuff is all dependent on what you learn from the market. The whole idea is to de-risk it as much as you can before you start over-investing in building.
How do you sign these big logos, and is your sales cycle way longer as a result of working with big enterprise?
It is way longer. So one of the things I built years ago is called the sales complexity matrix that I teach when I'm in my product market fit workshops and things. But the more expensive something is, the longer it takes to sell it. It's just that simple, right? That's human nature, right? If you're buying a song on iTunes, it's 99 cents. You don't need to talk to a sales rep at Apple about it. You've purchased it before, you know what it is, and you buy it, right? But say you want somebody to come replace the roof on your home. That could cost 10, 20, 30 grand. You might get multiple bids, you have interviews, you have people come over and do estimates, you check reviews, testimonials, you talk to former customers. That's what you do, right? And the same thing goes in enterprise sales. The bigger the sale, the longer it takes. So sales cycles are, if we get lucky and identify somebody who's got budget and ready, the old budget, authority, need, and timing, we could close a deal in 3 to 4 months. But most of them are 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer.
When you sign them up, do they come back again and again? Is it like a long-term partnership, or is it short-term, 6, 12 months and you're out?
No, the intent, and usually what happens is once they hire us, they stick with us because they see what success looks like, because we show them, right? What they're missing not just is the right people, but an operating model. And they haven't done it before and they don't know how to do it. So we show them what success looks like, usually with one particular idea or project, and then they come back more and more. So we tend to have long-term relationships, which is great.
Love the business. I use cold email for product market fit. I can almost instantly test out what product works with what niche. For example, the day before yesterday, I was testing build your own Sean GPT, for example, and I got the response yesterday. And I sent it to 10 folks. I was like, okay, there's somewhat of a product market fit there. I mean, from the get-go, obviously, I will check out more data and have more numbers in there. What do you use on your side to test out product market fit?
Well, I mean, to test ideas and gauge reactions for what I would call problem solution fit, there's a wide variety of channels, right? Email has become very saturated in recent years, but there are always new channels and ways of communicating with your market, depending on where they like to hang out and communicate, right? So everything's always a mix. It starts with trying to understand who your customer is, right? Where are they? Who are they? What do they care about? How do they communicate? Who do they communicate with? What channels do they use for communication? And then try and get live interactions as quickly as you possibly can. And then make sure you frame your user interviews in a way that gets you to the truth, an objective truth, and preferably with strangers. And then from there, product market fit, the way I define it, is can you get to a statistically significant cohort of early customers that will tell the world they're better off with you than without you, and why, in a market that's big enough for you to care about, right? With a specific use case. And that could be in a large enterprise sale, it could be 3 to 5, right? In a consumer play, it could be 300 to 500 or 30 to 50. It just depends on what it is, but you need to get to a pattern some way. And again, even then, you never feel like it's 100% there. You're always iterating on it. You're always working on it because there's always competition. There's always change. There's always new ways of doing things.
You've tested tons of ideas. You potentially had PMF the business potentially told you, no, we're not interested in trying that one? Do you execute on those? Do you start these yourself? And are you interested potentially to hire a CEO or founder to run these ideas of yours and take them to scale?
Well, we are right now. So for our corporates, we will do the ideation with them, for them, or let them do it and then go validate and test, right? U.Plus as a business, we are exploring right now the option of creating our own startup studio where we would go out and find founders for that. But we're in the early stages of that conversation, but startup studio model has always been effective when it's run by the right people. But that would be the instance where we would be out recruiting founders. The other instance where we'd be out recruiting founding teams is when we build a successful startup for a company who decides they want to spin it out, raise outside capital, hire an outside team, and then we'll help them do that as well.
Right, John. Well, thank you for this interview today. Where can people find out more about you and U.Plus?
Sure. Well, they can go to the letter U.Plus, PLUS, and learn more about us. They can connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm there at Sean A. Sheppard or Sean Sheppard on